Everyone thought his wife was perfect. Flawless smile, gentle voice, the kind of woman every man dreamed of. Their life looked like a fairy tale, a mansion of gold, laughter in every room, love in every photograph. But behind those doors, something was terribly wrong. One by one, the maids began running out of that mansion, crying, trembling, refusing to say why. He tried to ignore it, until the fear in their eyes became impossible to forget. That's when he set up hidden cameras, determined to uncover the truth, and that night, as he sat alone watching the footage, what he saw shattered everything he believed about love. Before we dive in, tell me, where in the world are you watching this from? I love seeing how far our stories travel. Now, let's begin. Ethan Marlowe had everything a man could ever dream of, or so the world believed. A sprawling estate wrapped in gardens that bloomed year-round, luxury cars that gleamed like polished stars, and a business empire that bore his name in gold letters. Yet for all the applause that followed him wherever he went, Ethan often felt like a man standing in the middle of a thunderstorm with no one to hear the rain. The mansion was his pride, his promise of success. But lately it had become something else, a stage where silence had more power than laughter. Celeste Marlowe, his wife, was the picture of grace. Every movement of hers looked rehearsed, deliberate, and mesmerizing. Her smile could melt any heart at a charity gala. Her voice was as smooth as piano keys, and when she walked beside Ethan, she completed the illusion of a perfect life. Yet behind that perfection there was something hollow. The housekeepers whispered about her. They spoke softly, never within her hearing, but Ethan had caught fragments. Strange moods, locked rooms, late-night footsteps. At first he dismissed it as gossip. Wealth always invited envy after all. But then the pattern began. The first maid left after 3 days. The second after a week. By the time the fifth quit, trembling and pale, Ethan knew something was wrong. He found her crying near the gate one evening, clutching her suitcase like a shield. "Mr. Marlowe," she whispered, unable to meet his eyes, "I can't stay in that house." "Why? Did Celeste mistreat you?" he asked gently. The woman only shook her head. She talks to the wall, sir. Sometimes she laughs, sometimes she cries, and there's something in her eyes when she looks at the mirrors." Ethan froze. "Mirrors?" The maid nodded, her lips quivering, like she's waiting for someone to look back. He wanted to press for more, but she ran off before he could. The iron gate slammed behind her like a closing chapter, and Ethan was left standing in the fading light, feeling the first shadow of fear creep into his heart. That night, at dinner, Celeste looked radiant, as if nothing had happened. She spoke about hosting another charity event, about redecorating the gallery wing, about how the staff never seemed to last. Her tone was light, but something in her smile didn't reach her eyes. Ethan studied her quietly. "Do you ever wonder why they leave?" She raised an eyebrow. "Because people don't understand what it means to live among excellence, darling." Her laughter followed like the clinking of glass, sharp and delicate. Ethan forced a smile, but his thoughts were miles away. Later that evening, as he passed by her dressing room, he heard her humming softly. The melody was unfamiliar, haunting yet strangely tender. Through the half-open door he saw her gazing into the mirror, whispering words he couldn't make out. Her expression was soft, almost childlike, then suddenly darkened. She reached out, touched the glass, and whispered, "You're not gone, are you?" Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He stepped back before she could notice him and walked away, his heart pounding. For the first time he felt afraid in his own home. Days passed. The mansion sparkled under sunlight, yet the air grew heavier. Celeste seemed fine in front of others, but alone she became distant, almost lost. She forgot names, misplaced objects, and sometimes spoke as if answering someone unseen. Ethan's business meetings became excuses to escape the house. But even in his office, the image of her face in that mirror lingered like a ghost behind his thoughts. One stormy afternoon, as thunder rolled above the glass roof, another maid, the last one willing to stay, came to Ethan trembling. "Sir," she said, her voice cracking, "I can't clean the east corridor anymore. Please don't ask me to." "Why not?" Ethan asked, the woman's eyes filled with tears. "Because Mrs. Marlowe goes there at night. She stands in front of the old portrait and talks to it like it answers her. Ethan felt a chill sweep through him. What does she say? The maid hesitated. She says, I did it for you. Don't hate me. That night when Celeste came to bed, Ethan pretended to be asleep. Her perfume lingered in the air, delicate as jasmine, yet he could sense something darker beneath it. Grief, maybe guilt. He watched her in the faint moonlight. Her eyes were open, fixed on the ceiling, her lips moving silently. When she finally fell asleep, Ethan lay awake for hours, staring at the chandelier's reflection flickering across the walls. The sound of rain tapping against the windows matched the rhythm of his thoughts. Something is wrong. Something she's not telling me. The next morning, Celeste was gone when he woke. He found her in the garden, barefoot, humming that same melody again. Couldn't sleep? He asked. She turned, startled for a second, then smiled too quickly. Just enjoying the morning. You should try it sometime, Ethan. The world feels different when you stop thinking. He tried to smile, but his chest ached with unease. That evening, as he watched her entertain guests, he saw the flawless version of her return. Charming, graceful, every word rehearsed to perfection. Yet when their eyes met across the room, something deep inside him whispered that the woman smiling at everyone wasn't the same one whispering to the mirrors. When the last guest left, Celeste stood in the empty ballroom, tracing her fingers across the glass walls. Do you ever feel, she asked softly without turning to him, that a house remembers? Ethan hesitated. Remembers what? Everything, she murmured. Every secret. Every lie. He tried to laugh it off. That sounds like something from one of your novels. She smiled faintly. Maybe. Or maybe I just know what it feels like to live with ghosts. That night, long after she had gone to sleep, Ethan walked through the mansion alone. The air felt thick, almost alive. Every creak of the wood sounded like a whisper. The mirrors along the corridor reflected his shape, distorted by flickering candlelight. He paused in front of one near the east wing. For a moment he thought he saw another figure standing beside his reflection. Delicate, feminine, familiar. But when he blinked, it was gone. He exhaled shakily. I'm imagining things, he muttered. Yet as he turned away, he heard something faint, a woman's laugh, light and distant, echoing through the hall. The next morning, Celeste acted as if nothing had happened. But Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the walls of his mansion were watching him back, and for the first time in his life, he understood something chilling. Money could build walls high enough to keep the world out, but not high enough to keep the truth in. The storm arrived without warning. Lightning split the sky like a wound in heaven, and rain hammered against the tall windows of Marlowe Estate as if trying to break in. Ethan stood by the window of his study, watching the storm swallow the horizon, his reflection shimmering faintly in the glass. Behind him, the mansion groaned, the kind of sound that only empty rooms make. The maids had all left. The laughter of guests had faded. Even Celeste had retreated to her private quarters upstairs, humming that same melody again. The one that made Ethan's skin crawl for reasons he couldn't name. He closed his eyes, pressing his fingers to his temples. He hadn't slept properly in days. Every time he did, he dreamed of mirrors, long corridors filled with reflections that weren't his. He was tired of guessing, tired of pretending everything was fine. That night, as thunder rolled through the valley, Ethan made a decision. He would stop wondering and start watching. The next morning, he called his oldest friend, Noah Kane, a quiet, sharp-eyed man who had once designed security systems for luxury hotels. Noah, Ethan said, voice low over the phone. I need cameras installed. Discreet ones. The kind nobody can see. There was a pause on the other end. That's a strange request coming from you. You already have top-tier security. This isn't about theft, Ethan murmured. It's about truth. Noah hesitated but agreed to come. Within 48 hours, he arrived with equipment that could have belonged in a spy film. Microscopic lenses, motion-triggered sensors, even thermal trackers. They installed them everywhere. Behind chandeliers, inside picture frames, under the stair railing, in hallways where the maids claimed to hear whispers. And finally, in the east corridor, Celeste's favorite wing, Ethan didn't tell her. He told no one. By the time the job was done, the mansion itself had become an observer, every corner alive with unseen eyes. Noah looked uneasy as he packed his tools. Whatever you're looking for, Ethan, he said quietly. Make sure you want to find it. Ethan forced a tired smile. I already know something's there. I just need proof. For the first few days, everything seemed normal, too normal. Celeste went about her routines flawlessly. Morning yoga in the solarium, afternoon tea in the garden, evening piano sessions that echoed through the halls like lullabies. Her laughter seemed genuine, her eyes soft, her charm intact. Ethan began to doubt himself. Maybe he was paranoid. Maybe grief and stress had warped his perception. But on the fourth night, the illusion began to crack. It started with a faint noise on one of the monitors, a soft knocking sound coming from the camera in the east corridor. The footage showed Celeste walking slowly down the hallway, her white silk nightgown brushing against the floor. She stopped in front of the old portrait, the same one the maid had mentioned. It was a painting of a woman with silver eyes, delicate features, and a faint smile that seemed both kind and cruel. Celeste stood there for almost a full minute, unmoving. Then, in a voice so faint the microphone barely caught it, she whispered, "Are you proud of me now?" Ethan froze. Lightning flashed, illuminating her face, and for a split second, her reflection in the glass frame didn't match her movement. He leaned closer to the screen, heart racing. Celeste turned her head to the side as if listening to someone behind her. "I said I'd make him love me, you see? I kept my promise." The words echoed through the study like falling glass. Ethan's hands trembled. Then she smiled at the portrait and said softly, "No one can take him from me." Not this time, the screen flickered. For a brief, horrifying moment, Ethan thought he saw another woman standing behind Celeste, translucent, watching her, but the image vanished before he could pause the frame. He shut off the monitor and sat back, gasping. His mind raced between disbelief and denial. Was she talking to a ghost? Or to herself? He wanted to run upstairs, confront her right then, but something stopped him. If she was unstable, confronting her might make things worse. He needed more proof. Over the next week, Ethan barely slept. He spent hours reviewing footage, his face pale in the glow of the screens. Sometimes Celeste would stand in front of mirrors for long stretches, her reflection staring back just a second slower than it should. Other times she'd walk into the nursery, though they had no children, and hum lullabies into the dark. One night, he saw her whispering into an empty chair, her hand gently stroking the air as if comforting someone invisible. Ethan's chest ached. This wasn't malice, it was madness. He began to wonder if the woman he'd married was carrying a pain she'd never shared. Still, the mystery deepened. He noticed a pattern. Every night around 3:17 a.m., Celeste left their bedroom barefoot and walked to the east wing. Sometimes she carried a small silver locket. Sometimes she held nothing at all. Each time she stopped before the same mirror near the staircase. And each time she whispered something Ethan could never fully hear, except one night when the audio caught 3 chilling words. "She forgave me." That phrase wouldn't leave him. She forgave me. Who? Forgave what? The next morning, Ethan finally asked her directly. "Celeste," he said carefully over breakfast, "do you believe in spirits?" She smiled faintly. "Don't you?" "I don't know," he said. "I believe in what I can see." She tilted her head, her eyes unreadable. "Then maybe that's why you miss so much." The way she said it, almost tender, almost taunting, made his skin crawl. That night, she fell asleep early. Ethan sat by her side, studying her face. She looked peaceful, fragile even, like a painting of serenity. He wanted to believe she was fine, that everything he'd seen could be explained away. But deep down, something told him otherwise. He returned to his study and watched the live feed again. At exactly 3:17 a.m., Celeste stirred. She sat up slowly, her eyes open but distant, as though she were asleep and awake at once. Then, without hesitation, she rose and began walking toward the door. Ethan watched as she crossed the hall and entered the east wing. He switched to that camera, his heart pounding. She stopped before the mirror, placed her palm flat against the glass and whispered, "I kept my promise, Ilara. He's mine now. He'll never leave you again." Ethan's blood ran cold. Ilara, the name she'd spoken before. He didn't know who Ilara was, but he knew, with every beat of his heart, that this was only the beginning. The next morning, Celeste acted as though nothing had happened. She smiled, kissed his cheek, and went about her day. But Ethan could no longer look at her without wondering which part of her was real, the woman he loved, or the stranger who spoke to unseen ghosts in the dark. He shut off the monitors and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The cameras had shown him more than he'd expected, yet less than he understood. Something was wrong, not just with the house, but with his wife's past. And the truth, whatever it was, had only begun to stir. As the rain began again outside, Ethan whispered to the empty room, "I wanted to see the truth." But what if the truth was never meant to be seen? The next few days passed like a fever dream. Ethan barely left his study. The glow from the monitors was the only light he saw, and the quiet hum of the recordings became the pulse of his existence. Each new clip he watched added another crack to the world he thought he knew. Celeste, his wife, his companion, the woman whose smile once steadied his soul, had become a mystery wrapped in shadows. Every night at the same hour, she drifted through the corridors like a ghost in silk, whispering to the mirrors, calling a name that chilled him, Ilara. He didn't know who Ilara was, but the name felt ancient, soft, and dangerous at once, like the echo of a song you're not supposed to remember. One morning, after another sleepless night, Ethan sat at his desk staring at the silver locket he'd found beneath Celeste's pillow. It was old, tarnished, and inside was a faded photograph. Two women standing before the mansion long before it belonged to the Marlowes. The first woman, smiling, regal, had eyes like storm clouds. The second stood just behind her, shy, beautiful, but distant. On the back of the photo were words scratched faintly by hand. Ilara, and see. Ethan's heart skipped. See Celeste. That afternoon, while Celeste was away at her art gallery downtown, Ethan drove into town and stopped at the public records office, a stone building that smelled of paper and dust. The clerk, an elderly man, led him to the archives when he asked about the mansion's original owner. He flipped through brittle newspapers until one headline caught his eye. Mysterious fire claims life of local socialite, Ilara Vance, 28. The date was from 12 years ago. The photo below the title made his hands tremble. The woman's eyes were unmistakable, the same as the portrait in their hallway. The same woman Celeste spoke to at night. The article read, Ilara Vance, philanthropist and heir to the Vance estate, perished last night when a sudden fire engulfed her home. Investigators ruled it accidental. Her personal assistant, Miss Celeste Doran, was found unconscious near the front gates. She survived with minor injuries but has declined to speak publicly since the incident. Ethan's breath caught. Celeste had lived there before. She had been there the night Ilara died. He felt his pulse in his ears. Everything, the mirrors, the whispers, the guilt in her eyes, suddenly aligned like shattered glass, rearranging itself into a terrible pattern. When Celeste returned home that evening, she was radiant, her eyes bright, her laughter easy. "You look pale," she said, setting down her purse. "Have you been working all day again?" Ethan's voice was calm, too calm. "Celeste," he said softly, "who was Ilara Vance?" Her smile faltered. For a moment, her pupils widened. A flash of panic she quickly buried beneath a practiced expression. "I told you about her, didn't I?" she said lightly. "She owned this place before us. You never said you worked for her." The silence between them thickened. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Finally, Celeste whispered, "Where did you hear that?" Ethan didn't answer. He only looked at her, long enough that she turned away, walking to the window like a woman standing at the edge of a confession she didn't want to make. "Ethan," she said finally, her voice trembling, "there are things in this house you wouldn't understand. Things that don't stay buried." He took a step toward her. "Then help me understand, please." Her reflection stared back at him in the glass, eyes dark, almost empty. She turned, forcing a brittle smile. "You wanted a perfect life, didn't you? Well, perfect lives are built on silence. Some truths ruin everything." And with that, she left the room, leaving Ethan standing in the echo of his own unease. That night, he returned to the cameras. He needed to know the rest. At 3:17 a.m., Celeste appeared again. This time she held the silver locket. She knelt before the mirror near the staircase, tears streaming down her face. "I loved you," she whispered. "I tried to save you, but you wouldn't listen. You said he'd never love me, that I was just a shadow. Her reflection quivered, almost alive, like the glass was breathing with her. "I didn't mean for the fire to spread," she continued, voice breaking. "I wanted to scare you, not kill you." Ethan's hand flew to his mouth. His heart slammed against his ribs. Then on the screen, the reflection in the mirror shifted, and for the first time, Ethan saw her, a woman, pale, graceful, eyes gleaming with sorrow, stared back at Celeste from within the glass. Her lips moved, though no sound came. Celeste sobbed harder. "Please, Alara, stop haunting me. I've paid for it every day. He loves me now. Isn't that enough?" The reflection smiled faintly. Then the lights in the corridor flickered, and Celeste screamed as the glass rippled like water. The screen went black. Ethan pushed away from the desk, trembling. His mind swirled with disbelief, horror, pity. He understood now. The maids hadn't run from ghosts. They'd run from Celeste's guilt-made flesh. Her trauma had filled the house until it seeped through the walls. He replayed the footage in silence, this time not as a husband afraid of a haunting, but as a man watching someone he loved being consumed by regret. In the morning, Celeste found him sitting on the floor of the study, exhausted. The monitors were still on, frozen on the image of her kneeling before the mirror. "Ethan," she whispered, realizing he'd seen it. He lifted his eyes to hers, tired, sorrowful, not angry. "You could have told me." Tears welled in her eyes. "You would have left." He shook his head slowly. "I would have understood." Celeste sank to her knees beside him. "I didn't kill her, Ethan. I swear I didn't. We argued that night, yes. She said I was trying to take her life, her place, her lover. But I never meant harm. I tried to stop the fire. When I woke up outside, the house was already gone." Her voice cracked. "I thought if I rebuilt everything, if I made this life beautiful, maybe she'd forgive me. But she never left. I see her in every reflection. She smiles when I smile. She weeps when I close my eyes." Ethan took her hands gently. They were ice cold. "Then maybe it's not her haunting you," he said softly. "Maybe it's you." Celeste broke down, sobbing into his chest. For the first time, he saw the truth. She wasn't wicked. She was broken, trapped inside the mirror of her own remorse. He held her for hours as dawn crept through the curtains. That evening, Ethan shut off every camera in the mansion. He needed silence, not the mechanical kind, but the human kind. He stood before the same mirror, the one that had witnessed every secret. His reflection looked older, wearier. Behind him, Celeste entered quietly. "Do you still see her?" he asked. Celeste shook her head faintly. "No, but I feel her." He turned toward her, his voice calm. "Then it's time we stop living inside her memory." Celeste managed a fragile smile. "And start living inside ours." For a long moment, they simply stood together, their reflections aligned at last. No distortions, no second shadows. Outside, the rain had stopped. The world was quiet again, not empty but forgiving. Yet deep within the mansion's heart, one mirror still flickered faintly, as if holding a secret it wasn't ready to let go of. The morning after their confrontation arrived slow and gray, like a sky unsure if it wanted to rain. For the first time in weeks, the mansion was quiet, not the heavy silence that came from fear, but the tender kind that followed truth. Celeste didn't speak much. She moved through the house like someone relearning how to breathe. Ethan followed her quietly, watching not as a husband keeping watch over his wife, but as a man watching a soul step out from under its own shadow. The truth had changed everything. Yet strangely, it hadn't destroyed them. It had stripped away illusion and left behind something raw, something real. Still, the air inside the mansion carried weight, the memory of secrets too long unspoken. That afternoon, Ethan walked to the east corridor, the one place he'd once feared most. The tall windows flooded the hall with gentle sunlight now, washing away the gloom that had haunted it. He paused before the old portrait of Alara Vance, her painted eyes still shimmered with that same knowing expression. But for the first time, Ethan didn't see menace there. He saw sadness and forgiveness. He whispered, "You were loved," and she was lost. But it ends here. Behind him, Celeste's soft footsteps echoed. She joined him in silence, her fingers trembling as she reached out and touched the edge of the frame. "She was the only person who ever made me feel seen," Celeste said quietly, "and the one who made me feel small. I wanted to be her, Ethan. I wanted her life, her freedom. I didn't realize I'd spend years trapped inside her memory instead." Ethan turned to her. You don't owe her your life anymore. You don't owe anyone that." Her eyes welled with tears. "Then why does the house still feel like it's watching me?" "Because you keep watching yourself through its eyes," he said softly. "It's time to look forward, not back." That night, Ethan made a decision. He walked to his study and opened the security system interface, the heart of all the hidden cameras. The screens flickered, showing dozens of quiet rooms, the ballroom, the garden, the library, the grand staircase, all empty now. Every camera had seen too much: lies, guilt, fear. But they'd also seen truth, and that truth had done its work. He hovered his hand over the delete all command. For a long time he hesitated. Those recordings were the map of his awakening, proof of everything that had happened. But then he thought of Celeste, her trembling hands, her sleepless nights. Proof was no longer what they needed. They needed peace. He pressed the button. One by one, the screens faded to black. When the last monitor went dark, Ethan felt something inside him exhale, like a ghost finally leaving the room. Celeste found him sitting in the dark. "You deleted them," she said softly. He nodded. "The cameras were my eyes when I didn't trust my heart. But I don't want to live like that anymore." She smiled weakly. "And if the past comes back?" He reached for her hand. "Then we face it together." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and for a while they simply sat there, two broken souls finally learning to heal side by side. Weeks passed. The mansion, once cold and echoing, began to change. Celeste opened the windows more often. She replaced the dark velvet drapes with white linen that danced with every breeze. Ethan filled the halls with music again. Not the somber kind that haunted the past, but soft jazz. The kind that made you forget time existed. The staff began to return one by one. The maids who had fled the house now found it different, lighter, warmer. The mirrors no longer carried a chill. Even the air smelled of new beginnings. It was as though the house itself had sighed with relief. One morning, Celeste stood before the mirror at the top of the staircase, the same mirror that had once been her torment. She stared at her reflection quietly. For the first time, she didn't see Alara's ghost behind her. She saw only herself, flawed, weary, but alive. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Not to anyone else, but to the woman she used to be. "I forgive you." The sunlight caught in the glass, scattering across the walls like gold dust. And in that light, her reflection smiled back, whole. Downstairs, Ethan watched from the hall unseen. He smiled too. That evening, they sat together on the terrace as dusk painted the sky with lilac and blue. The garden rustled softly with life. Ethan poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to her. "To beginnings," he said. Celeste tilted her head. "Not endings?" He shook his head gently. "Endings are just truths we finally understand." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Then to truth. Their glasses touched. As night settled, the wind stirred the curtains, carrying faint echoes from the halls. Laughter, music, and maybe something else. But it wasn't haunting anymore. It was memory, gentle, harmless. Celeste turned toward Ethan, her eyes soft. "Do you ever wonder if forgiveness changes the dead?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe it doesn't change them. Maybe it frees the living." For a moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was full, not of tension, but of peace. The next morning, Ethan found Celeste in the garden, painting for the first time in years. The canvas bloomed with color, sunlight through leaves, reflections on glass, the faint silhouette of a woman walking into light. He stood behind her quietly until she noticed him. "What are you painting?" he asked. She smiled. "Closure." He kissed her forehead. "It's beautiful." "So is the truth," she murmured. Months later, the mansion was alive again. They hosted small gatherings, charity events filled with laughter, art exhibits that filled the halls with music. People spoke of the Marlowe estate as a home reborn, unaware of the pain that had once filled its walls. But Ethan and Celeste never forgot. Sometimes, when the nights grew long and rain fell on the glass roof, Ethan would catch Celeste staring at the mirrors, not with fear but reflection. And sometimes just before dawn, when the first light touched the glass, he could swear he saw a faint silhouette smiling from within. Not haunting, just watching. Alara's presence perhaps, not as vengeance, but as peace. One evening, after a charity gala, Ethan wandered back into his study. The house was quiet again. On the desk lay the old silver locket, the one he'd found months ago. Celeste must have left it there. He opened it. The old photo remained, but something new caught his eye, a folded note tucked behind it. In Celeste's handwriting, it read, "You taught me that truth isn't the end of love, and it's where love begins." Ethan smiled through tears. He placed the locket beside the window where morning light would find it. Outside, the first songbird began to sing. In time, the mansion's story became something of a legend, not one of ghosts, but of redemption. Visitors said it had a strange calm, like stepping into a memory that had finally learned to rest. And those who met Ethan and Celeste often said they had never seen two people so deeply connected, not because their lives were perfect, but because they had walked through imperfection together and come out whole. They had learned the hardest truth of all, that love built on lies will always collapse, but love rebuilt on honesty can stand against anything, even the ghosts of the past. One final scene, years later. The camera of life would pan across the Marlowe garden at dawn, flowers open, sunlight warm, the mansion glowing with quiet grace. Inside, Ethan stands before a mirror, the same one that once held fear. He looks at himself and smiles. The reflection smiles back. No lag, no distortion, no second shadow. He whispers to it, "We made it." And for a moment, in the stillness of the glass, a faint whisper answers, not haunting, but blessing. "You were never alone." Ethan closes his eyes at peace at last.
If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today, because sometimes the right story finds you when you need it most.